Everyone, I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're diving into a topic that is absolutely foundational to good epidemiologic research: questionnaire design. Now, if you're studying for the ACVPM exam or the NAVLE, or if you're just starting to design your own research studies, this module is going to give you real, practical tools you can apply immediately. Here's something I want you to think about from the very start. Your data is only as good as the instrument you use to collect it. We can have the most elegant study design in the world, a beautifully powered, perfectly randomized cohort study, but if the questionnaire we use to measure exposure or outcome is flawed, the entire analysis is built on a shaky foundation. Garbage in, garbage out, as they say. In this module, we're going to cover everything from how to write a clean, unambiguous question to how we evaluate whether a questionnaire is actually valid and reliable, to how we reduce bias in the way respondents remember and report information. Whether you're thinking about owner-administered surveys for companion animal behavior studies or farm management questionnaires for herd-level disease research, the principles we cover today apply across the board. Let's get into it. Let's start by asking, why does questionnaire design actually matter so much? Does questionnaire design matter so much? Let me put it plainly. A poorly designed questionnaire introduces information bias, also called measurement bias, and that is one of the most serious threats to the internal validity of an epidemiologic study. Unlike random error, which averages out, information bias is systematic. It consistently distorts your estimates in one direction, and it cannot be corrected at the analysis stage. Once the data are collected badly, you cannot fix it. A well-designed questionnaire rests on three pillars. First, validity. Is the instrument actually measuring what it claims to measure? Second, reliability. Does it produce consistent results across different administrations, raters, or time points? And third, feasibility. Is it practical? Can your respondents actually complete it? And can your team actually administer it in the field? Think about what this looks like in veterinary context. You might send an owner-administered questionnaire to dog owners about diet, behavior, and housing conditions, or survey a farm manager about vaccination protocols, housing density, and biosecurity practices. In both cases, the accuracy of your entire study depends on how well those questions were written and structured. This is not a minor methodological detail. It is the foundation of your evidence. Here's an ACVPM exam tip. Information bias arises when exposure or disease status is measured differently across study groups. On the exam, you may be asked to distinguish information bias from selection bias or confounding. Remember, information bias relates to how data are collected, not who is included. So why questionnaire design matters, let's zoom out and look at the whole process. Building a good instrument isn't a single act of writing questions. It's a disciplined 8-step workflow, and rushing or skipping any step is where studies get into trouble. The first 4 steps take you from concept to draft. Step 1, define the information needed. Translate each research objective into specific data items using a data map. Variable, question, response options, analysis plan. Step 2, choose your question types: open versus closed-ended, Likert scales, rankings, dichotomous, multiple choice, match to the analytic need. Step 3, write the draft questions. Simple, unambiguous language, one concept per question, no jargon, no double barreling. Step 4, organize the flow. Logical sequence, skip patterns, sensitive questions last, moving general to specific. The second 4 steps turn that draft into a deployable instrument. Step 5, design the response scales, appropriate anchors, balanced options, mutually exclusive and exhaustive ranges. Step 6, pilot test with your target population. And I flag this as the critical step because it's the one people skip most and the one that matters most. Use 5 to 10 respondents from the actual target group, not colleagues or students. Step 7, revise and finalize. Modify based on pilot findings, repilot if changes are major, and document every revision for reproducibility. Step 8, establish your collection protocol. Interviewer training, standardization, mode choice, and data entry procedures. Notice that actually writing questions is only one of 8 steps. The work that brackets it, defining what you need up front, and pilot testing before you deploy is what separates a rigorous instrument from a shaky one. Down to write a questionnaire, one of the first decisions we make is what type of question do we need? This choice has downstream consequences for everything: data coding, statistical analysis, and the richness of information we capture. Broadly, we divide questions into closed-ended and open-ended. Closed-ended questions give respondents a fixed set of options: dichotomous yes-no questions, multiple choice formats, Likert scales for attitudes or agreement, and ranking tasks. Open-ended questions allow free text responses, richer but much harder to code and analyze at scale. For numeric data like herd size or age, collect the exact value directly so you can support regression and correlation analyses. Now here's where measurement theory enters the picture. We also need to think about the level of measurement our response format produces. Nominal scales categorize without ranking: species, breed, sex. Ordinal scales rank, but the intervals aren't equal: mild, moderate, severe. Interval scales have equal spacing, but no true zero. Temperature in Celsius is an example. Ratio scales have equal spacing and a true zero. Body weight in kilograms. This matters because the level of measurement determines which statistical tests are valid. You can't compute a meaningful mean on a nominal variable. Know your scale types cold. They show up on board exams regularly. Here's an ACVPM exam tip. You may be given a variable description and asked to identify its measurement scale. Nominal equals categories, no order. Ordinal equals ranked, unequal intervals. Interval equals equal intervals, no true zero. Ratio equals equal intervals, true zero present. Body weight in kilograms is a ratio. Pain severity, mild, moderate, severe, is ordinal. About question wording, because this is where even very experienced researchers slip up. The golden rule is simple: use plain, everyday language. Avoid jargon and technical terminology your respondents may not know, and write at an appropriate reading level. Prophylactic antimicrobial use becomes antibiotics given to prevent disease before it occurs. Meet your respondents where they are. Now, the classic wording errors. First, double-barreled questions ask about 2 things at once. Do you vaccinate and use anthelmintics regularly? What does a yes mean if a producer does one but not the other? Split them. Second, leading questions. Don't you agree on-farm biosecurity is important? Imply a preferred answer. Ask neutrally instead. Third, loaded or emotionally charged language like antibiotic abuse or factory farming primes respondents before they answer. Fourth, double negatives. Is it not common for you to Is it not uncommon for you to, or confusing to parse, rewrite in the positive voice, and always use a specific bounded time reference? In the past 12 months, did you vaccinate your herd for BVD? Beats, do you vaccinate regularly? Wording also has to defend against response biases. Recall bias creeps in when you ask producers to remember events from years ago. Keep recall windows to about 12 months for most practices. Social desirability bias leads producers to over-report compliance. Anonymous, non-judgmental formats reduce it. Acquiescence bias is the tendency to agree with any statement. Balance your scales and add reverse-coded items. And prestige bias inflates claims about education or professionalism. Double-barreled questions are the single most common error in published veterinary questionnaire studies, so watch for them above all. And for sensitive topics, anonymous, self-administered formats beat face-to-face interviews. Here's an ACVPM exam tip. Given a question stem, be ready to name the specific flaw. Double-barreled, 2 questions in one, leading implies a preferred answer, or negative wording creates confusion through negation. Each introduces systematic measurement error. Big question. Is your questionnaire measuring what it's supposed to measure and measuring it consistently? Those are two different properties, validity and reliability, and you need both. Think of the archery target. Reliability without validity is precise but wrong. Validity without reliability is right on average but useless. Start with validity. Face validity is the most basic. Does the instrument look right to experts and respondents? Content validity goes deeper. Does it cover every relevant dimension of the construct? A biosecurity instrument must ask about visitor access, feed, water, vectors, wildlife, and personnel hygiene. Miss a pathway and you undermine content validity. Construct validity asks whether the instrument behaves the way the underlying theory predicts, assessed with factor analysis and hypothesis testing, including convergent and discriminant validity. Criterion validity is the gold standard comparison. Concurrent validity correlates with a reference standard measured now. Predictive validity forecasts a future outcome. Reliability is consistency under identical conditions. Retest reliability checks whether you get the same result on re-administration. Inter-rater reliability checks whether 2 raters score the same animal or farm the same way. For continuous outcomes, we use the intra-class correlation coefficient, ICC. Above 0.75 is good. For categorical outcomes, we use Cohen's kappa. Above 0.6 is adequate. Above 0.8 is good. For multi-item scales, Cronbach's alpha above 0.7 signals acceptable internal consistency, while above 0.95 may signal redundant items. Here's an ACVPM exam tip. Know the 4 validity types cold: face, content, construct, criterion, concurrent, and predictive, and when to use kappa versus ICC. Kappa for categorical data, ICC for continuous. Thresholds like Cronbach's alpha greater than 0.7 and ICC greater than 0.75 appear frequently on the exam. About response scales, because how you structure the answer options is just as important as how you word the question. The most common format is the Likert scale, strongly disagree through strongly agree, but there are real design decisions buried in there. First, number of points. A 7-point scale offers more granularity and is generally preferred for research, while a 5-point scale reduces fatigue and is fine for most field settings. settings. Even numbered scales drop the neutral midpoint and force a choice. Use them when genuine neutrality is meaningless. Second, anchor labels. Fully labeled scales are clearer and more reproducible than endpoint only labeling, and anchors must be symmetric. If one end says strongly agree, the other must say strongly disagree. Third, order effects. Keep a consistent direction throughout and randomize list order where feasible to counter the primacy effect. Fourth, the visual analog scale. A continuous 0 to 100 line gives higher precision and is widely used for pain scoring in animals. The Glasgow Composite and Colorado State pain scales are validated examples, though a VAS is best suited to electronic or structured clinical collection. Fifth, frequency and duration. Define the time frame explicitly and prefer objective anchors. Often means weekly to one producer and daily to another. Subjective anchors introduce systematic error, so ask for an actual count when precision matters, and always make response categories mutually exclusive and exhaustive. With individual questions and scales in hand, let's zoom out to the whole instrument, how to sequence it from start to finish. Questionnaire is more than a list of questions. It's a structured instrument with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And the order matters enormously for data quality and respondent experience. Start easy. Open with simple, non-threatening items, demographics, or basic herd descriptors to build rapport and get respondents into the flow. Group logically. Keep related questions together by topic and sequence general to specific. Unexpected topic shifts disorient respondents and increase random error. Save sensitive questions for last. Income, regulatory compliance, antibiotic use, welfare incidents. Once trust is established and the respondent is invested in finishing. This is the funnel approach. Broad to specific, easy to sensitive, and close professionally. Thank the respondent, remind them of confidentiality, and provide contact information. Skip logic, also called branching, is essential when questions only apply to some respondents. If someone answers no to vaccine use, route them straight past the follow-up questions on vaccine type and schedule. On paper, this is fragile. A respondent told to skip from question 9 to question 14 may accidentally answer question 10 through 13, which is one of the strongest arguments for electronic data collection with programmed routing. Make every branch crystal clear and remember that every extra question raises respondent burden and lowers your completion rate. Every question must earn its place. Here's an ACVPM exam tip. Questionnaire length and complexity directly affect response rates and missing data rates, both of which introduce non-response bias. A scenario describing low response or high missing data in a survey study should trigger consideration of questionnaire burden as a contributing factor. We've designed the instrument. Now we have to prove it works before deploying it. That's the non-negotiable step of pilot testing. Questionnaire should ever go straight from draft to deployment. Pilot testing is not optional. It's an essential step in instrument development, and skipping it is one of the most costly methodological mistakes a researcher can make. The most powerful qualitative technique is cognitive interviewing. You sit with 5 to 10 participants from your target population. Real dairy producers, if you're studying dairy producers, not colleagues, students, or the research team, and ask them to think aloud as they read and answer each question. Probe with, what does that question mean to you? And what were you thinking when you chose that answer? You're listening for confusion, assumptions about undefined terms, difficulty recalling within the time frame, and discomfort with sensitive items. Cognitive interviewing reveals problems the author literally cannot see because they already know what every question means. After the cognitive phase, you revise, then run a quantitative pilot, a small-scale administration to 20 to 50 of your actual target population. Track completion time, patterns of missing data, skip logic adherence, item non-response, and floor and ceiling effects. Any item missing more than about 10% of responses is a red flag. Major structural problems mean you revise and repilot. Minor issues, you revise and proceed. Document every change for reproducibility. And for multilingual studies, use translation and back translation to verify linguistic equivalence. Here's an ACVPM exam tip. Cognitive interviewing is specifically designed to identify comprehension problems in questionnaire items, not to measure reliability or validity. If a question asks which method identifies ambiguous or confusing items during development, the answer is cognitive interviewing, not factor analysis or test retest. Once the instrument is validated, the next decision is how to get it in front of respondents. Modes of administration shape the data itself. That's next. For your questionnaire is not just logistics. It directly affects data quality, response rates, and the kinds of bias your study is vulnerable to. So let's walk the major modes and their trade-offs. Self-administered questionnaires, paper by mail or drop-off, or electronic by email, web, or QR code. Let respondents answer at their own pace and private. That privacy reduces social desirability bias, the tendency to give flattering rather than truthful answers, and these modes are lower cost with wider geographic reach. The downsides: lower response rates, no chance to clarify a confusing question, literacy requirements, and skip logic errors on paper. Interviewer administered questionnaires, face-to-face or telephone, deliver higher response rates, real-time clarification, and interviewer enforced skip logic, and they suit complex instruments. But they reintroduce social desirability bias. If a veterinarian asks a farm manager about antimicrobial withdrawal compliance, they may give the quote correct answer rather than the true one. They also carry interviewer effects and higher cost. A mixed mode design, say a web survey with telephone follow-up of non-responders, can lift response rates but introduces mode effects you must account for in analysis. Match the mode to your population, budget, and the sensitivity of your questions. Here's an ACVPM exam tip. Social desirability bias is highest in interviewer administered surveys, especially for sensitive topics like drug use, noncompliance, or biosecurity violations. When a study uses in-person or telephone interviews to ask about embarrassing behaviors, consider social desirability bias the primary threat to information validity. Choosing a mode is only half the battle. You still have to get people to respond. Let's go through the evidence-based toolkit for boosting response rates next. Design questionnaire is worthless if no one returns it, and low response rates open the door to non-response bias. The good news is that response rates are not luck. There's a well-validated toolkit, much of it rooted in Dillman's total design method. Start before the survey even arrives. Advance notice. A letter, email, or phone call warning respondents it's coming can add 15 to 20% to your response rate. Personalization matters too. A personally addressed cover letter with operation-specific details beats a generic, quote, "Dear producer," and signals legitimacy. And brevity is decisive. Every additional minute of completion time costs you responses, so pretest the burden and aim for 10 to 15 minutes maximum. Then work the follow-through. Small prepaid incentives outperform promised ones, and non-monetary incentives, like a summary report of results, work especially well with academic and producer populations. Structured follow-up contacts, a postcard reminder, then a second copy, then a phone call, each incrementally lift response. Finally, do a non-response analysis. Compare early versus late responders on key variables. Since late responders approximate non-responders, calculate your rate to AAPOR standards, and if responses fall below 60%, run a formal non-response bias assessment. Never assume non-response is random. We've covered the entire arc from research question to deployment. Let's bring it all together with the key takeaways. Made it to the finish line. Let's pull everything together and make sure the most testable concepts are locked in before you close out this module. Questionnaire design is not a peripheral skill. It's at the heart of epidemiologic data quality. Every study that collects primary data through interviews or surveys lives or dies by the quality of its instrument. We covered the three core pillars: validity, reliability, and feasibility. We learned to spot and avoid wording errors, double-barreled, leading, and negative phrasing. We saw how recall bias and telescoping distort self-reported data, how mode of administration shapes social desirability bias and response rates, and why rigorous pilot testing, cognitive interviewing, plus field pre-testing is non-negotiable. For the ACVPM exam specifically, make sure you can do 4 things. Identify a specific wording flaw from a question stem, distinguish the validity types, face, content, construct, criterion, and how each is assessed. Select kappa versus ICC based on data type, and explain the mechanism of recall bias and how it differs from non-differential misclassification. These come up. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel at Veterinary Epidemiology, and I'll see you in the next module for risk analysis.